Good afternoon. I'm pleased to be here today with Education and Childcare Minister Demetrios Nicolaides to release the report from the Action Team on Aggression and Complexity and to share a milestone in our path towards providing a world-class education for every single student. And I would like to thank our other speakers who are here today as well. Lynette Anderson, Chief Superintendent of the Edmonton Catholic Schools Division, and Joanne Pitman, Chief Superintendent of the Calgary Board of Education, for being here today as well. The Action Team report on aggression and complexity in schools is going to guide our next steps in addressing a significant barrier to the education experience that every Alberta student deserves. We are already working on gathering data that, in addition to this report, will further inform our work on the Class Size and Complexity Cabinet Committee. And before I go any further, I do want to thank the members of the Action Team for this comprehensive and thoughtful report. We tasked this group with providing immediate and long-term recommendations to the Minister of Education and Childcare for addressing behavioral, mental health, and learning needs in schools. Over the past few months, the team has consulted with teachers, occupational health and safety officers, speech-language pathologists, psychologists, and organizations including community-based service groups and special interest and advocacy groups. What they heard was very concerning. The causes of aggression and classroom complexity are difficult to determine. They can involve academic, behavioral, socioeconomic, linguistic, emotional, and mental health factors. Our government asked the Action Team to not only assess the problem, but also to focus on solutions. So I am encouraged by the work of the team and the contributions of many dedicated Albertans to bring forward a roadmap of the opportunities for our government to take action together with our education partners. Part of this is ensuring that we have the space. We're building schools and funding education at a rate that is unprecedented in this province. Just yesterday, of course, we announced 5 more projects that are being fast-tracked, one in Calgary, 3 in Edmonton, and 1 in Plamondon. Our government is also making a record-high $10 billion investment in schools and education this year, and we are committed to the hiring of 3,000 new teachers and at least 1,500 new education assistants in the next 3 years. So Albertans deserve to know that we are focusing these resources on the classrooms that have the most needs and on the needs in the classrooms. They deserve to know that we support the success of every single student. Over the next few months, you can look forward to the decisions of the Class Size and Complexity Cabinet Committee as we move to implement solutions informed by the recommendations that Minister Nicolaides will expand upon. And I will take this opportunity as well to thank the Alberta Teachers Association, school boards officials, as well as parents, education advocates, and others for the support that they have extended to this Action Team. I have been thrilled over the past few weeks with the enthusiasm and openness to collaborating on solutions that truly will improve the educational experience for the students and for the educators who serve them. Thank you, and I'll hand it over to the Minister.
Well, thank you, Premier, and good morning, everyone. As Minister of Education and Childcare, I've heard from teachers, students, parents, and education partners across Alberta about the challenges in our classrooms. And today marks an important step as we work together to address these issues. We're releasing the final report from the Aggression and Complexity in Schools Action Team. And my thanks as well to our individuals who served on this committee for their work. This report is the result of months of hard work and collaboration from education leaders, trustees, administrators, teachers, and support staff. It brings together many perspectives from across the province. Our goal here is simple: to use these recommendations to create learning environments where every student can succeed. Now, building on this Premier's comments, I will walk you through some of the actions we're taking to improve supports in the classroom. I am confident this report gives us a clear path to tackle the challenges facing our classrooms. The Action Team's recommendations will help us move forward thoughtfully and effectively. First, I'll walk you through the Action Team's work, and then I'll share what Alberta's government has already done and what it will do next to address complexity. Work on the Action Team began in June, and since that time, our 25-member Action Team has worked with experts to identify key challenges affecting our classrooms and find meaningful solutions. Their voices reflect those working tirelessly to support our children every day, including educators, administrators, family specialists, and other community partners. I want to thank the Action Team for bringing not only your expertise, but your passion for making a real impact. Your thoughtful insights and perspectives shape recommendations that will move us forward together. The team's purpose was to find practical, classroom-focused solutions in response to concerns around diverse learning needs, behavioral challenges, and incidents of classroom aggression. Through the report, the team has given 7 recommendations for immediate, short-term, and long-term actions. These include clarifying the primary role of education and educators, distinguishing academic instruction from clinical and therapeutic responsibilities, and ensuring that expectations are realistic and sustainable. It includes replacing the standards for special education to align with the developed inclusive education policy framework. It also includes a recommendation to require school authorities to align and maintain school-level guidance for managing violent student behavior and ensure staff safety is consistent with provincial requirements. It also includes a recommendation to develop a consistent provincial model for individualized program plans, IPPs, that include a clearly defined purpose. Another recommendation calls upon us to create a tiered continuum of supports that can be activated on predictors of need rather than formal diagnoses, ensuring students receive timely interventions. It also calls upon us to expand specialized programming, designated special education programs, and schools for complex student needs. These recommendations are not just ideas. They represent the experiences of teachers and others who work in classrooms and support students. I'd again like to thank the Action Team and its members for their dedication to student and teacher success. Their work will be crucial as we continue to move forward together. As we head into the future, Alberta's government is committed to taking immediate action. In fact, we've already begun. Actions taken to date include, in October, of course, we recently established the Class Size and Complexity Cabinet Committee, co-chaired by the Premier and myself. Our first meeting was November 13th, and over the coming months, we will roll out solutions informed by the Action Team's recommendations. We'll also work closely with school boards, community leaders, and academic experts to ensure we are guided by expert advice. As recommended by the Action Team, we have been working with school boards to collect data on class sizes and composition throughout the month of November. This committee will use this data to make informed decisions about direct resources to the classrooms that need them the most. Data collected from school boards will be made available to the public in January and will be released annually moving forward. We will continue to work transparently in partnership with our education system and informed by frontline expertise to ensure that actions we take have the highest impact possible and truly support student success. With respect to next steps, creating safe and supportive learning environments for students is a top priority for our government. Ensuring students are receiving the support that they need and supplying schools with the resources that they need to provide that support is critical. A key mandate of the Cabinet Committee includes using the data we collect to guide our commitment to hire 3,000 new teachers and 1,500 new EAs over the next 3 years. Using a data-informed approach, the Cabinet Committee will engage with partners to develop a better understanding of where support is needed the most. Our goal is to allocate resources in a way that reflects the needs of Alberta's school system by using targeted and informed decision-making process. Over the coming months, the committee will continue to roll out recommendations from this report, including guiding the development of a new inclusive education policy framework to replace the 2004 standards for special education. Complexity and class sizes are very challenging issues, and while we are moving very quickly to get solutions in place, it will take some time to see improvements. But during this process, I am committed to ensuring we hear directly from teachers in order to guide our actions and make sure we're hitting the mark. To that end, I will be personally heading up the creation of a teacher advisory council to ensure our government hears directly from teachers. We will have more detail on that council in the coming weeks, but by taking these steps, guided by these recommendations today and by data, and of course the voices of our frontline educators, I'm confident we will build a stronger, more inclusive education system that supports the success of every student. We know that complexity is not a challenge that can be solved overnight, but with strong dedication, data-driven decision-making, and a shared commitment to student success, we will make the necessary progress required to support our classrooms. I appreciate the work of everyone who contributed to the process, and again to the Action Team for their dedication and expertise. It's now my pleasure to invite Joe Pitman, Chief Superintendent of the Calgary Board of Education and co-chair of the Aggression and Complexity in Schools Action Team, to the podium to share her remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Premier, and thank you, Minister Nicolaides. As co-chair of the Aggression and Complexity in Schools Action Team, I first want to thank my fellow Action Team members for bringing their experiences, their background to this important work. Throughout this process, we sought seriously to consider individual and system perspectives while seeking consensus wherever possible and produce a report that can truly support a path forward in all school authorities. I also wish to thank the many teachers, support staff, education partners, and agencies who took time in a really condensed period to share their experiences, wisdom, and hopes for the future. Working together, it was clear that we share a common goal, creating the conditions that lead to the ultimate success of every student. You've already heard Minister Nicolaides share specific actions that are contained within the report, and I would encourage everyone to review carefully the broader context of the entirety of the report and the opportunities in front of us. I believe the recommendations in the report identify both immediate opportunities and set a roadmap for ongoing collaborative work that will improve classroom conditions and, most importantly, our student outcomes. While the report does outline significant challenges currently, I need to state that there are many current examples of excellent, outstanding programming and supports across school authorities. Our systems, schools, and professional teams, led by our teachers and classrooms, have shown a high degree of commitment to providing strong programming across a broad range of needs. However, the volume and shifting severity of need does require additional resources and collaboration. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this context, resulting in the commitment of timely and ongoing work, and I'm hopeful that the recommendations will help the Class Size and Complexity Cabinet Committee make informed and meaningful decisions. This will allow us to move forward, not only as an education system, but a broader community, recognizing the value of every child and family. I'd now like to invite Lynette Anderson, Chief Superintendent of Edmonton Catholic School Division, for her remarks.
Good morning and thank you. Edmonton Catholic Schools is pleased to have contributed to the Aggression and Complexity in Schools Action Team. Our board chair, Sandra Palazzo, was part of the team and, although unable to join us today, shared with me that the recommendations reflect both the needs and the voice of our division. The report reflects what we see in our schools every day. Students' needs are significant and growing, and this affects our staff's ability to support every learner. As needs increase, so does staff workload. It impacts their well-being. We know staff must be supported to best serve our students. Classroom complexity is amplified by anything that requires special attention from a teacher as they plan, teach, and assess. Imagine trying to manage several individualized program plans, medical and mental health needs, severe behaviors, and multiple languages, all while delivering the curriculum in an engaging and relevant manner. As our schools are becoming more crowded, many have run out of space to accommodate growth. As a result, class sizes are increasing. Our staff remain committed to every student, but resources and supports have not kept pace. Given these complex conditions, the report suggests some potential solutions. Expanding program unit funding and streamlining access to services for children before they enter grade 1 will allow school divisions to provide vital early intervention. This will help set our youngest learners up for long-term success. Students with complex needs often require clinical and therapeutic supports from multiple ministries. By coordinating these responses and clarifying roles, we can better serve students and families, reduce inefficiencies, and ease pressure on schools. This report provides a much-needed roadmap for the steps we need to take to help ensure every student in Alberta receives the best possible education with the right supports at the right time. By addressing the complexity in our classrooms, we can create better conditions for learning and for those who teach and support our students. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to our media Q&A for the press conference. We'll start off with questions here from the floor before making our ways to the phones. A reminder to please state your name and outlet before asking your question, and we'll be taking one question and one follow-up. Go ahead first at the mic.
Sure. It's Ted Henley from CBC News here in Calgary. Minister and Premier, if you could both comment on this, if you don't mind. If I'm understanding this correctly, the report's being received and then passed off to the next committee as well in the advisory council. Am I right on that, or are you acting on any of the 7 recommendations right away?
Yeah, we'll be acting on the recommendations as quickly as possible. The cabinet committee, of course, has the ability to look at resource allocation to help improve our education system. So we're going to put it in front of them and look at where we can make some immediate decisions to make immediate improvements.
Okay, and I mean, there's some crystal clear recommendations in here about, sustained integrated supports and early intervention, expanding the programs to make grade 1 kids eligible for supports, et cetera, enhancing ongoing learning for educational assistance and that type of thing. I mean, when can we expect specific action on those? Do we wait for the committee to kind of come back, or is there stuff in the works already?
Nothing's in the works at the moment. Of course, we're just releasing the report. We're going to bring it in front of the cabinet committee. And we have, of course, the ability to allocate resources through that cabinet committee. We anticipate some of the earliest that we'll be able to implement next steps will be as early as January. And so we still, as well, are waiting to collect the data that we've asked our school boards to provide us, but we'll be able to move very quickly. So, absolutely.
I would say that we've already started implementing some of the recommendations from the report. The cross-ministry collaboration that we used to assemble our cabinet committee, that came from the insights of this report. That when we realized that we had to bring mental health and addiction to the table, children and family services, assisted living and social services, that was a key insight, I think, from the committee, that they knew that there was additional complexity that could be dealt with different ministries. So that's one part of it. The data we have given as a deadline for submission is November 24th. So we'll be collating that data, and we have our next committee of the task force, our next cabinet committee on November 27th. Following one, I believe, around December 11th, and then a following one after that, January 9th. So the work is going to really stem from the data that is collected, guided by these recommendations. What we're trying to do initially is identify the oversized classrooms as well as the ones that are incredibly complex, so that we can get the extra resources to each classroom. We've been talking with the different school boards about when they have a session break, and the high schools tend to have their session break at the end of January. So if there's some additional resources there, we'd like to have them for when they start their new semester. The K-9 schools tend to be year-round, and so we can really start deploying resources immediately, because those classrooms stay pretty well stable for the course of the entire year. So we have to get the data first, but this is going to guide all of the decisions that we make around how we deploy those extra dollars and resources. Thanks. Yeah.
Hey, Tim Brooks, CTV. I want to switch gears here. I just want to ask you, Premier, for your reaction to Premier Eby's comments about expanding TMX capacity, what that might look like. He's essentially saying that you seem to be more interested in fewer regulations on the industry than you are in actually building a pipeline. So I'd just love to hear what you think about the whole thing.
Well, I would say that let's start with where we agree. We agree on the major projects that have already been identified on the BC coast, with LNG Canada 2 and Silisms being 2. Silisms in particular is going to be really important, since about 70%, I think, of that gas is going to come from Alberta. We also agree that Trans Mountain Pipeline should be maximized. I think the proposal there is about 300,000 to 400,000 barrels a day. But where we may disagree is, I think that is the beginning, not the end of it. I want to see pipelines in all directions, north, east, southwest. There's lots of proposals that are on the table. including having an economic corridor that goes to the Northwest BC coast, one that goes to the Hudson Bay, one going up to Gray's Bay. There are a number of different project proposals that have been talked about going down south, whether it's Enbridge or South Bow or others. There are proposals that could potentially see us transport oil to Thunder Bay and then out through the St. Lawrence Seaway, as well as oil by rail going all the way to Nova Scotia and Sydney. So I'm not closing the door on any of those. We're keeping all of those doors open, and I'm encouraged by the fact that over 70% of Albertans or of Canadians agree that we should be developing our energy infrastructure, including the majority of people in British Columbia.
My other question involves another recall coming down. Are there any plans as of now to change any of the parameters around the recall legislation?
Well, we've been talking about it as a caucus and as a cabinet. We think that there are some procedural issues that are unfair, that, for instance, those who are the subject of recall often don't get told right away, so that prohibits them from being able to set up their candidate accounts. There's some complexities about why they can't use their existing candidate accounts that they've raised money for to start defending themselves. There are GoFundMes that are taking place, and we're worried about that, of course, since you can't very easily trace where the dollars are coming from, and we've had instances in Canada of foreign interference, so that's a concern for us. It's also supposed to be locally generated, and yet AFL keeps bragging about how they're bussing people in and helping out with those campaigns. So I would say that the spirit of the law is not being lived up to, and so we're just having a discussion about whether there does need to be additional fences built into that legislation, but no decisions have been made yet.
Sorry, really
Thanks,
quick.
Tim.
No changes to the threshold, though, to actually introduce one of those recall.
No, we changed that threshold. It's 60% of the previous voter turnout, and we've already made that change. I think the error that we made is in perhaps not considering some of the other procedural changes that we probably should have made at about the same time. Maybe it was because we hadn't had any recalls that had been launched, and so we weren't aware at the time that there were some of these problems. And so we're just seeing if there's a need for us to identify and change some additional rules.
Sorry, just turning on my recording. I'm Devika with the Calgary Herald. I think the top question that I have is that, at least for the teachers that I've spoken to, ATA rep that I've spoken to, this isn't the first time that they've seen this play out. 10 years ago, maybe a little bit over 10 years ago, similar situation. We saw a strike play out. After the strike, we saw a similar committee actionable report came out. Some outcomes came out, yet over 10 years later, I think for some teachers, they feel like they're in the same position. And more importantly, there are teachers who don't necessarily have a lot of trust in the province that these outcomes are going to stick, be constructive, and actually make their lives easier. So how would you assure teachers that this situation is different, that these outcomes are going to stick, they're going to stick long term, and yeah, it's going to make their lives and their students' lives a lot easier? I
would say we're in an unprecedented situation compared to previous years. As we mentioned when we were at a previous press conference, I mean, there was a time not so long ago when the Calgary Board of Education was talking about reducing student spaces because we'd had stagnant growth for a long time, and post-COVID, we weren't sure what our population numbers would be. It's this last 3 years where we have had all of the restrictions taken off all of the immigration streams that has resulted in a massive surge of people coming here, including a massive surge going into the schools. And so I don't know that we've ever had a circumstance where you can have a class of 30 kids and 27 of them are English language learners. I don't know that we've ever had a situation where you might have a new elementary school class and kids have to be taught how to respond to their own name. As a story I've heard. I don't know that you've ever had a case where kids are punching or biting teachers to the point where it causes so much damage they need surgery. I don't know that we've had those situations before. These are the kind of stories that we're hearing, and so this is the reason why we have to take a very different approach. We have to figure out how we can deal with those who are have very severe needs in a way that maintains a safe classroom environment for the teacher and a safe classroom environment for the other kids. So We're keeping an open mind. That's why we're willing to look at everything, including the 2004 special needs guidelines, to see if we need to make some changes to that. We're looking at what is happening in other jurisdictions, like in Saskatchewan, which was very well received, as I understand it. They also had some tension with their negotiations, and they came up with their special classrooms with a teacher and 2 education assistants, and I've heard that it's going very well. So I think that there's no reason why we can't be acting quickly on this, and we've got a number of educators on our task force who are going to hold us to account for that. We just have to get the data first, identify the classrooms that have the most complexity, and start dealing with those one at a time, develop the new policy around special needs education, and just show the teachers that we've heard them and that we're going to address these issues.
I think a top issue for teachers during bargaining was classroom sizes. That's the top thing that they want. They want to see a decrease in classroom sizes. I know, Minister, you had mentioned that we're waiting for data collection that will be published in January. Is there a timeline that you can offer to teachers right now? When can teachers expect to see changes in their classroom sizes?
I can tell you that I think it was the 2003 Learning Commission that came out where they identified the ideal classroom sizes being 23 for kindergarten to grade 6, 25 for junior high, and 27 for high school. So that's where we're starting as our guidepost of what an optimal class size would be. And we'll be looking at the outliers. I mean, I think you've heard and probably reported on stories of class sizes of being over 40. Well, that should never happen. So why do we have class sizes over 40? Those would be the ones we'd be looking at. We would also anticipate, and I've talked to many teachers who have a certain range of complexity that they can manage. Maybe 4 or 5 kids with mild and moderate disabilities in a reasonable sized classroom, that might be manageable. But having more than half your class that can't speak English, or more than half your class with some kind of code for complexity, that's not reasonable either. So that's what we're looking for. Let's look at all of the data, and it's a lot. I think we'll be looking at over 30,000 classrooms. Let's zero in on the ones that are oversized over those limits, and then and further zero in on the ones that have an extreme amount of complexity. And let's start rolling out the resources and new strategies for dealing with those. That's how we're going to approach our work. I think we can begin to start doing some of that as of the next meeting once the data comes in, do some of that through December, but really be able to be in a position to make some significant changes in the new year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Rick Bell, Post Media. Off topic, and I'm sure you know what topic it is.
You're a former school teacher, though, Rick.
I would like to offer my suggestion, but I won't take the time
Okay,
here.
and
it's very simple. So if Minister Nicolaides would stay afterwards, I'll give him my
fantastic.
10 years of teaching experience example. Because I knew when it switched over from the old system to the new system that doesn't seem to be working, below these many decades ago. You've got Premier Eby. It's on all the TV stations this morning, saying you don't know what you're talking about, who says he's being excluded from the talks in very colorful language about you don't really know where you're going. He lampoons your whole efforts, calling it a $20 million communications project. He says you're putting his projects at risk because the people who are accepting his projects might not accept his projects anymore if yours goes through. I mean, and then you've got Liberal MPs jumping in scrums saying that they don't like it, and the MOU hasn't even been signed yet. So this is all in advance of that. So what is your reaction to the fact that there seems to be quite a bit of pushback even before the announcement of the MOU?
I believe in Team Canada, and I hope they all do too. This is what Team Canada looks like, that when you've got provinces that don't have access to a shoreline, we cooperate to make sure that we can get our products to market. We used to be able to do that fairly easily in the past, and we haven't been able to do it in recent years, and that's the entire reason for the Major Projects Office. It's what the entire federal campaign was waged on in the last election, and we're testing it to see if everybody's serious. A lot of people wrap themselves in the flag talking about how much they support Canada and want to work together, and then when it comes right down to it, not everybody lives up to that commitment. So I'm asking them to live up to the commitments that they've made over the last year. We need to get new markets. The way you get new markets is you have to be looking either to the west, to Asia, or to the east, to Europe. And so, yeah, it means that you're going to have a variety of infrastructure crossing borders. And so we're prepared to put forward the initial work to see what that would look like. And we hope that we'll be able to have the federal government support us.
And supplementary, what do you think the reaction of Albertans is or will be if there's this continued sort of saber rattling going on pre and post MOU? And if you could very quickly in one sentence also tell us, how close are you, since we asked you a few days ago?
I would say the ball is in Prime Minister Mark Carney's court. That I think we all saw that there was also a lot of saber rattling in previous iterations of the British Columbia government. And in the end, the decision is the federal government's to make based on their assessment of what's in the national interest. We are making a very, very strong case that building a new pipeline to Asian markets is in the national interest. We are finding some receptivity on the part of the new Prime Minister, and I would say if we're going to get a deal, it will be in a matter of weeks.
Hi, Premier. Will Vassar with the Western Standard. You previously drew a line in the sand over 9 points. We've recently heard rumors of a pipeline. The question would be, what about those other points?
The discussion we've been having with the federal government has been three parts. One is a new bitumen pipeline to Asian markets. Another is the Pathways Project, so that we can have a lower carbon intensity barrel going through that pipeline. And the third aspect is creating an investment environment so that all of our producers are willing to invest in expanding their operations, and that means addressing the lion's share of the 9 bad laws. So if there's going to be an MOU, it will have to include all three.
And then the second question would be, country singer Corb Lund recently announced that he's starting a citizens initiative to hold a referendum against coal mining. He credited you as part of the inspiration for wanting to do that. Could you comment on that?
Oh, maybe he'll write a song about me. I'm glad I'm able to be his muse. I support citizen-initiated referenda. I think it's really important that people have their say. So the rules are out there, and I'll watch with great interest. But what I can say is that, we heard the message. That's why we changed the coal policy. No open-pit mining, no mountaintop removal, high standards for addressing the issues around selenium, which is a problem with any type of mining when you do end up exposing the surface. We've seen a number of mining operations now switch to underground mining, which is fantastic. We want to see more of that. And we've also been engaging with the companies that are suing us to buy back the leases and the freehold rights. We already have 30,000 hectares of freehold and mineral leases for coal that are now back in Crown hands. And so we'll continue to have those negotiations to make sure that we're protecting our pristine areas. But I think the world knows I think most people know that there's a big difference with metallurgical coal. You need it to make steel. And if you love the renewable sector, there's a lot of steel that goes into making wind turbines. If you love the solar industry, you need the coal to be able to make those panels. So we believe that if those are the kinds of investments that those on the left would like to see, then they're going to have to also support some of the mining operations that allow for those, as well as all the mining operations that allow for batteries to be produced. So we have a challenging conversation going. I totally get that. But we are going to find the right balance to make sure that we're protecting the environment, but also allowing those projects to go ahead. And we'll see what kind of reaction he gets to his petition.
Thank you. Thanks, Will. We have time for a few more questions. We'll take one more from the room, and then we're going to go to the phones.
Hi there. Sarah Offen with Global News. I'm wondering, for either of you, whoever wants to take it, just asking about the framework and the remaking of the framework for inclusive or addressing special needs in schools. And, that has been inclusive to this point, but speaking with a lot of parents and teachers today, many feel that it isn't inclusive because their needs are simply not being addressed. And so they're going to other places like private care, which some can't afford, or homeschooling, that kind of thing. How important is it to you that this new model that's created is inclusive? Is there room for nuances within that, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember a little bit of the context and the dynamic. Of course, the current standards for special education and inclusive education were published in 2004. So the world is a very different place. Even as the Premier mentioned, just in the past 2-3 years, our province has become a very different place with significant population increase. And I know, speaking directly to teachers and trustees and administrators and others, that teachers have to wear multiple hats today. They have to be teachers, translators, interpreters, clinical professionals, therapeutic experts. That's just not realistic. That's, of course, just not a feasible environment. So we have to update the standards to reflect the realities that we see in our classrooms today. One of the recommendations, of course, from the report talks about role clarity, which I think is particularly important. So we do have to update the standards to make sure that they're reflective of the dynamics that we have today. Clarifying roles, and most importantly of all, making sure that every student is able to receive the support that they need to succeed.
If I may, just looking at some of the preliminary data, I was talking to your chief of staff, one of the big issues is the huge surge in English language learners and them coming in at later and later grades. And so our normal model would be, and one of the superintendents can correct me if I'm wrong, but the normal model would be inclusion, and then through just interaction in the classroom and osmosis, within 5 years, those kids are pretty fluent in English. But if you end up with having more kids in the classroom who don't speak English than do, and they're coming at later and later grades, the system's kind of broken. It's not working the way it should. So what you probably need to do is, if you've got 15 kids in a class who are English language learners, maybe you need to have a special English language learning class, and then as those kids develop the facility in English, then they can be included. So I think those are the kinds of conversations that we need to be honest about. Those are the kind of conversations that we need to have. And it's really that it's a continuum of inclusion, that ideally, we would be supporting a child to the extent that they're able to be included, having them in special classes if they're not able to and they need the one-on-one, and then hopefully getting them to a point where they can be fully included as they develop either the social maturity or they develop the language skills to be able to do that. That's what I think we have in mind.
And then if I'm able to, my follow-up maybe for Ms. Pitman, just wondering, we've heard a lot about the rising need for, ESL within the classroom and that kind of thing. Can you give us some kind of look inside the classroom in terms of the other challenges that have grown and what these classrooms are looking like? Are there more students that have IPPs, that kind of thing? Can you expand on that?
Well, certainly just starting off with the EAL population for CBE alone, we have 44,000 students. That's 31% of our entire population. That's 17% higher than the rest of the province. So it makes sense that that's a distinct pressure point. When I think about other changes in population, in the last 3 years, we've seen an additional 3,400 students identified with special education needs. So that's 1 in 5. So for us, and when we look at what that means all told, alongside the fact that those are coded students, what I've not included within that are, and one of the pieces that Minister Nicolaides spoke to and the report speaks to, is predictors of need. We need to be able to be as responsive as possible across multiple systems, not just within education, to meet all of those needs and make the biggest difference so that we have strong communities. That's the priority for us.
Thank you. We have time for 1 or 2 more questions. We're going to head to the phones. Operator, could you put through our first caller, please?
Janet French from CBC Edmonton. Please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. These questions are for Minister Nicolaides. I've heard you say before that the funding model isn't the problem with schools. But growing school boards have been saying for years that, yes, the funding model is the problem. Even the new version of it, the teachers during the labor dispute said the funding model is the problem. The report says this is a quote, the full implementation of inclusive best practices remains a significant challenge driven by factors including rapid population growth, increasing student complexity, and limitations within the current funding model. Is a reexamination of the funding model on the table on this point, and why or why not?
We're always looking at changes to the funding model and to funding approaches. Of course, just in the last budget, we moved away from the 3-year weighted moving average to a 2-year average adjusted enrollment model based on feedback that we received from our school boards. We are also currently looking to take a closer examination on funding that's provided through the SLS grant. That's a specialized learning support grant, of course, which provides overall in let me back up. Overall in funding, we provide approximately $1.6 billion to support students with specialized learning needs. And I have asked my team to engage with our education partners to get a closer look as to how those dollars are being allocated and to see if there are ways in which some of the funding distribution provided through the SLS grant and through other grants can be targeted in a much more precise fashion. So we are looking at that funding model for sure.
Glad you mentioned SLS because that is a lower funding rate than PUF. And one of the recommendations in this report is to restore PUF funding to grade ones and also expand it to mild to moderate coded kids. And it also recommends adding mandatory half-day kindergarten rather than optional. Which of those two recommendations will you act upon and why or why not?
Well, we'll be looking at all of the recommendations, of course, and as the Premier noted, and as I've commented as well, our first priority is going to be analyzing the data that we receive back from our school divisions, looking at the highest priority areas, because we have to address those immediate pressures. As the Premier mentioned, and as I agree, having classrooms of 30, 40 students with severe cases of complexity contained within them must be addressed as a matter of urgency. So that will be our most immediate priority. And then, of course, you know, this work will not end just in the course of 6 months. There are long-term recommendations in here as well about changing legislation as well. And so we'll look to prioritize these recommendations and in terms of most urgency and move from there. Of course.
If I may just add, I mean, some of the insights that have already come out of our task force is an equity issue, that in some cases, parents have greater means to do private testing, and so their kids will get coded, and that will have resources, and then other parents may not have that funding to be able to do that. And so we got to thinking perhaps there needs to be a different testing model so that kids coming into school, we've already done the testing so that the school boards have the information so that they know how to manage that rather than having these kinds of delays and rather than having inequities. So that's the incredible value of having educators and administrators at the table to give us those kinds of insights. As you know as well, we've mentioned that there is also about $1.6 billion in Jason Nixon's department that is dedicated to those with special needs under the age of 18. And leveraging that with an equivalent amount from Demetrios' department might just result in a different funding model, especially if we've got kids who are not going to grow out of whatever learning challenges they have. There are going to be some kids who are going to need support for life. So that may also require a little bit of a different approach, a different lens. So there's, as Demetrios said, everything is on the table. We're getting great insight and guidance. I think we'll have a better idea once we get the look at the full data to understand just where our complex needs are and how acute it is in which schools and which classrooms.
Thank you. And we have time for one more question. Operator, could you put through our next caller, please?
Luna Marchette at Radio Canada. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so the report says over and over that due to the lack of prevention, treatment, and services, the school workforce is just drained by student demands and just more and more crisis, and the workforce is just typically getting burnt out physically and emotionally. So then why is your workforce plan adding the number of teachers that only follows enrollment growth and keeps the student-teacher ratio the same for the next 3 years?
Well, we'll be taking a close look, of course, at student-teacher ratios. As we've mentioned, we're looking forward to receiving the data that we've requested from our school divisions on Monday. That'll give us a strong understanding of challenging areas where student-teacher ratios are particularly high and need to be addressed. So that will be a key focus of the work that we're doing. In addition, of course, we are pledging to hire thousands more teachers and educational assistants and other specialized staff as needed to help reduce the overall workload that teachers are experiencing. I talked earlier about the need to provide rule clarity as well. And so we'll be looking at all of these pieces to help ensure that teachers are not overburdened and that we're addressing these challenges head on.
Yeah, so my follow-up would be that the government cut extra ELL funding from 7 years to 5 years a decade ago, and school boards have been begging to re-expand to 7 years. So why not do that?
Sorry, I didn't hear the first part of your question. Could you repeat that?
It's about the government that cut extra ELL funding from 7 years to 5 years a decade ago.
Oh, right. Well, we will be looking, of course, as the Premier mentioned, and as a lot of our preliminary data shows, that we have seen a significant increase in the number of students who require support in learning and understanding English. So that will be an area that we're going to focus on specifically. We already are taking some action in this area. In Budget 25, I was able to increase the grant rates specifically for EAL students so that school boards have more money available to them to support students who require English language support. And in addition, we will be looking to make other changes as necessary to support those students. There is a significant bubble of students that we are contending with at the moment that do have challenges with respect to learning English or where English is their second language. And that will be an absolute priority area that we need to address. So we'll be looking at all of the pieces that we can to help address that challenge.
Thank you. And that'll conclude today's press conference. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.